My name is Emily. I go by So Angry online. On Instagram, it's so.angry. On Twitter, it's so_angry, X, whatever. And this is my hasty guide on how to interpret sewing patterns that you buy from Permanent. We're talking like Simplicity, McCall's, Berta. I'm not talking about things that you get on Etsy that somebody made. That's a whole other ball game. I can't help you with that. They can help you with that though. So message them. So I'm talking about McCall's. I prepared a lot for this panel I bought a pattern, I looked at it, I looked at some of my old patterns that I've used. I talked to a lot of professionals and seasoned hobbyists about using commercial patterns, and you know what they all said, and I was like, hey, what's your advice for reading a pattern? And they're just like, man, I don't fucking know. Like, I just do it a lot. A lot of them, you know, once the seasoned sewists, you know, respond to, I don't even read the instructions because they're worthless. I'm like, very helpful, guys, thank you. What I do typically when I'm making a cosplay, and here are some cosplays that I've made. If you don't know me, that's my credentials, I guess. I start with a pattern that is pretty close to what I want to make. Maybe the seams are in the right spot, maybe it's got the right sleeve style that I'm looking for, but I know I'm going to modify it, so it doesn't super matter. But I need to know how the pattern works to use it. I'm going to use it straight up the first time, so I need to know how to put it together. And then sometimes you can actually buy patterns, like Yaya Khan has a great line of costume patterns. Her bodysuit pattern is pretty good. I didn't pick a good pattern because like I needed it to be a little frustrating. But sometimes, like I made a Sea of Thieves costume, I wish I had a picture of. Actually, I have the pattern. I bought this pattern from Simplicity to make two things. I made a Cassandra here, came from this bodice. And then I made a Sea of Thieves costume, and it just had like a chemise, and I used the pattern for this undershirt to make it. And the reason my username is So Angry is because I was making that chemise and I was so frustrated. I'm like screaming at the pattern from my craft room. My partner down the hall hears me just like, why would you do it that way? This doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? And it literally made me so angry. There's 3 layers to that sentence. I want y'all to appreciate that real quick. But anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience using a commercial pattern in case you have never used one and you just want a leg up, you want to get started. If you have used one and you were like, that was just like needlessly confusing and I didn't like it, that's pretty much the general universal experience though, so don't feel bad about that. Maybe you're using them and you just like feel a little unsure about the terminology. You know, you can Google some things, but there's like only so much. And I find that if you are reading a sentence and you have to Google 3 words in that 7-word sentence, you feel very discouraged. So I want to try to help you out with that. Maybe you are okay on all that, but you're just like looking for some best practices for in-pattern modification. I'm hoping we can get to that. I don't know if we can, since this isn't the kind of demo I thought it was going to be, but we can talk about it anyway. Maybe you just want to make sure there isn't a better way. Maybe you're like, man, this experience really sucked, and I'm here to tell you, I'm validating your experience. Yes, it sucks. That is. Also, I'm very entertaining, so you can just like be along for the ride. So this is a pattern. I already told you about that. If you want to sew angry, use a commercial pattern. I bought this pattern as the demo. This is a hoodie. I bought it because I kind of want to make a hoodie. And I thought that it would be a good demonstration because when I opened it up to check the instructions to see if it would be sufficiently confusing, there was a typo in the first set of directions. There's like 3 P's in the word upper, and I didn't get that far. I was like, perfect, let's do it. We're going. All right, so let's talk about some of the words that we're going to encounter in a pattern that are not in the normal. Yes?
Can we take pictures of your own?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I would share these slides publicly, but I don't know that they're going to be helpful on their own without me like yammering on in front of them. But if you feel like it's helpful to take a picture and then like make notes or something on your phone, go for it. So, because I didn't define these because I thought that would be a really boring slide. I'm just going to talk about it. So, interfacing. I've talked about this a lot of my panels. If you've been to them before, you've heard me say interfacing is a notion. It is something that you buy that goes in your pattern. It goes in between your outer visible fabric, called the facing fabric, and the lining, the interior fabric. Some interfacings are nice, and you can just interface and not line it. Most of them, you're going to want to line it. You don't want that interfacing up against your body. There are a lot of kinds of interfacing. So you're actually going to go to the fabric store. There's going to be a section for it, and it's kind of outside the scope of this to tell you what to use. But when you get a commercial pattern, it's going to tell you to get interfacing, and I'm going to show you all that here in a minute. And you're going to be like, which one? So I would talk to the people at the fabric store about that. They could probably help guide you. But generally, you're going to pick your interfacing based on two things: the kind of fabric that you're working with, and the kind of fabric you want it to be in the end. What kind of drape is it going to have? What kind of thickness? Is it going to be stretchy, non-stretchy? So just a couple things to think about. Nap is not what we're going to do instead of working on a pattern. Nap is when there's direction to fibers that come out of the fabric. Velvet has a nap. A nap is basically like it's going to go in one direction and not the other. Like, think about petting a cat. You know, you have a pet from the back up. It's going to move their fur and they're going to hate you. You pet from the top down and it makes it smooth. Corduroy has a nap. And so when you sew things with nap, it's important to know which direction the nap goes in, because it's going to affect how you lay your pattern out. So you want to know that nap is essentially the direction that you want your smoothness to be. So when it says with nap, it's in the direction you're petting the cat, right? So pile is similar to nap. You can have pile without nap though. Carpet has a pile. Fur has a pile. Fur has a pile and a nap, because fur is going to lay in a direction. There are some furs that are really short that just stick out and it doesn't matter. Looped fabric like carpet fibers are going to have a pile without a nap, and pile is just the height of how much that fiber sticks off its backing. See, some fur. Bolt, you see the word bolt, that is basically what the fabric comes on. It comes in multiple lengths, and that's going to be important for your pattern. So pay attention when you're picking your fabric out. How long is the bolt? Yardage is essentially how much fabric is coming off that bolt in yards. So fabric is just for whatever reason we do it in yards, and that's essentially 3 feet. Selvage are the ends of the fabric. They finish them in a special way to keep it from unraveling. And so the selvage is at the end and the yardage goes along the length, right? Hem and seam allowance. So that's going to be the distance between the cut edge and the stitch line. It is a hem when it's the end of the fabric, and it is a seam when it is in between pieces. I'll take a picture of that if you want to. But essentially, most commercial patterns are going to have a 5/8 inch seam allowance and hem allowance. The hem allowances will vary though, because like if you're making a pair of pants, they might give you a 1.5 inch hem allowance because they want that hem stitch to be real high up to make it look nice, like how hems do. So we'll be looking at that on the pieces, and it will tell you on every piece that you have what your hem allowance and what your seam allowance is. It should anyway. So we want to pay. That's going to be something you're going to pay attention to. And you're going to need to know what it means when you get there. Baste. What is basting? I got a whole screen for basting. It is a temporary joining of your material. It is not food. We want to take a nap and have some food, but we can't. We are basting. And basting is important. You can't skip it, but it tells you to baste. You need to baste. I would be impatient and not do it, but it's just one of those unskippable steps that you find out after you've skipped it enough times, and you're like, why does it look like shit? Pinning is technically basting, but you can also do a machine baste. A machine basting is done with the longest stitch your machine has. Machine basting is great when you have a straight seam, and your fabric is just like a little fiddly, and you're gonna baste it. And sometimes you can like baste your zippers in a little bit. I know I hand baste. You're gonna hand baste it. You're gonna clip baste if it's a fabric you can't pin or is too thick, like leather or vinyl. Do you have a question, or are you just scratching?
Yeah, about like basting thread. I've heard of that before.
There is a kind of thread that you can use for basting, but honestly, you can use any thread that you want to that's gonna not make your fabric lay funny. So if you're using really thin, lightweight fabric, you're just gonna use regular universal thread. You want it to be a bright, non-matching, high contrast color to what you're working with because you're gonna remove it later. It is temporary. You wanna be able to get that bad boy back out. You need to be able to see it. But typically I would say that basting thread is gonna be like a heavier weight just to like hold it down. And your stitches are gonna be, especially by hand, they're gonna be pretty wide and you're just gonna go in and out. I always hand baste my zippers. That is the only way to make them come out. Because if you try to pin it, the pins make the fabric go like this, and that's just not going to fly with a zipper. So that's what basting means. When it says baste, you're going to be doing one of these. Some more things. There's ease and also ease. That's not confusing at all. In the context of the garment fit, we're talking about how much extra room you have. So if you have a jacket that you're making and it has 4 inches of ease, that means there's going to be 4 inches extra dimension of the circumference of your jacket than your body measurement is. If you want a looser fitting garment, you're going to have more ease. If you want a tighter fitting garment, you're going to have less or none. But then there's also an ease when you want to ease a piece of fabric in stitching in the context of the sewing directions. That is when you take, you see this, this piece right here. There's more fabric here than there is on the lower one, right? But we need the notches to match. Like there's a notch here and there's a notch over there, and those are going to match, but there's way too much fabric over the one. So we're going to ease this piece into that. And it's, Google that, because you're going to want to watch somebody do it. But you're essentially going to make 2 basting stitches in the seam allowance of that piece. And then you're kind of, it's going to be like a mild gathering. These people here did a crappy job. I didn't want to use this picture, but it was the clearest picture I could find in the process. I would have smoothed that out a little bit more. I would get in there with my fingers and like make it lace, because you essentially don't want it to be a gather or a pucker. You're just going to take a fabric that's going to have more fullness and join it to a less one. When would you do this? You're going to do it for shoulders to get that good shoulder cap. You're going to do it for a back piece here. For a yoke, we can talk about a yoke right now. That piece back, that lower, the plaid ham fabric, the yoke is that top piece. And so sometimes you're going to ease the yoke and the shirt piece together so that you have more fullness at your shoulder blades. We're going like this, but it's not real full of fabric up here at your shoulders where you want it to lay smooth. It just creates structure to your garment to allow for more movement and also looks nice. Does that make sense? Okay. Easing is like one of those things where it's like, it kind of like changes your life a little bit. A lot of times you'll see them at shoulder seams where there's going to be more fabric here at like this is going to be a longer seam at the back piece than the front piece, and you just want to ease it slightly. Easing to set in a sleeve, in a structured sleeve, is like the only way to go. So definitely watch some YouTube videos about how to ease. Facing. Now I did just say that the fabric that faces out that you see is called the facing fabric, and that is how it is referred to in your patterns. But also facing is a piece that you sew into a garment that allows you to have a finished edge without a visible seam. It's this piece in the shirt you see at the top. Why did they just come up with different words for these things? I don't know. I wasn't there when they started. They didn't ask me. But a facing is also a piece that you sew into something like a collar or a cuff to turn it so that it lays smooth without a top stitch. A dart is that thing that you put in a body curve to bring in fabric so that you make like a little mountain out of your fabric that fits over body curves. A placket. I don't have a picture of a placket. I wish I did, but I couldn't find a good high quality one. But it's basically if you have a button. Does anybody have a button-up shirt on? Not a single person. That's crazy. If you have a button-up shirt, the placket is the thing that the buttons go on. You make like extra folds to make that. There's also plackets for buttons in your, like when you have sleeves here. So sometimes you'll see, like to make the placket, they're talking about the thing where the buttons and stuff go. Yeah.
Also where like a zipper
You could call that a placket, yeah. Kind of like a weird flap opening. I don't know that they would generally call that a placket, but some of them could. You know, that just be aware that placket is kind of where an extra fold of fabric is going to go for an opening. A button placket is the most common one, though. All right. So here we have some more terminology here, grain and cross grain. Do y'all know what grain and cross grain is? That's a pretty basic standard one, just like when you have a warp and a weft. You made a face? Yeah, so grain is essentially, so you have the selvages here. The bolt is going this way. There's more fabric that way and that way, add and then some. Selvages are here. The grain is parallel to the selvage. The cross grain is perpendicular to the selvage. And generally, when you lay out a pattern, you want to know what grain means, because it's going to tell you to cut along the grain line. And you're like, what line? You want that line to match the direction of the grain. Okay, cross grain is just the other way. Yes, sir.
Like say you have denim.
Uh-huh.
Denim like sort of goes on an angle.
Okay, it doesn't though.
Right,
that is just the way it's like a twill. Yeah, it's got an angle, but the weave is still the same. It's just the way they're crossing each other makes a diagonal pattern.
Okay, so the diagonal is not the grain.
No, it is not. The diagonal is on the diagonal. That's the next one. It's on the bias. You're going to essentially be 45 to that. Pattern. That is a weave pattern, and that's not the visible grain. Flip it over and look at the back, and you'll see. Probably should see. I guess it's still the same pattern, but you know it is a little deceptive. But it's still going to be. You're going to get the selvages, and you're going to go parallel to the selvage, and cross grain is perpendicular. If you cut it on the bias is at the 45 degree. That is a very special cut that makes non-stretchy fabrics stretchy. If you've ever, I've got some fabric here, let me see. It's not on-stretch fabric though, it's stretchy. We're just gonna pretend. So like, if you can't stretch it this way, and you can't stretch it this way, and you go along the bias, it'll let you stretch it. Because just of how the fibers come together. I can't explain it very well, but basically when you cut along the bias, it just allows for more stretch. If you have ever bought bias tape, that is basically strips of fabric that are cut on the bias, and you can turn it on a curve and it'll lay smoothly, because it just has a lot more give to it. It's not stretchy necessarily, it's just more wiggly. That's the best way I can describe it, but it will take a curve and movement a lot better than a grain. If you're on the grain, it's basically, it is what it is. It is the length that it is. So pay attention to when it tells you to cut on the bias or on the grain, because that is going to affect how the fabric stretches and behaves once it's in the garment. If you are in a hurry or you don't have much fabric and you're like, all right, I'm going to cut, this shirt front this way, and slightly on the bias, what you're going to find is it's going to kind of skew and hang differently. So then it's not going to come out well, and you're going to be upset that you spent all this time making a shirt that is skewed. Stay stitch. Stay stitch is one of my unsung heroes. When it says to stay stitch, that is, and I wish we had time to do this in my seams practice panel, but I cut it for time. When you stay stitch something, it's essentially a pre-stitching. It is not basting. It's not going to be removed. It is a stabilizing stitch. And you're going to do it when you have curves. So if you're sewing on a curve, and that curve's going to be stressed out especially, or you're going to need to snip it, or it's like a sleeve and it's going to be a lot of stress on that particular one, you're going to stitch just inside the seam allowance. Like I would say, and it's actually going to describe it, it's going to be 1/8 inch towards the edge. So if you have your edge of the fabric here and your stitch line is here, your stay stitch is going to be like right there. And it's going to be a shorter stitch. And it's basically just going to give extra support to the fabric at that moment, at that part, so that when you're pulling it around the curve, it doesn't deform and become a totally different shape. If we were doing the princess seams earlier, I wanted us to stay stitch, right? And then you clip up to that stay stitch line, and then you know the clipping's not going to go through. And then as you're pulling it apart, you know that curve is going to stay the shape it is, and you can deform the edge of it all you want. It's just extra support. And if you're doing a princess seam, or a shoulder cap with a really aggressive curve, stay stitching is going to help keep the integrity of the shape. It's also, I think I have a picture. Oh, look at the pictures I didn't show you guys. I'm so sorry. Guys, here's some grain. I forgot I did this. I made this like 4 days ago. So that's the grain line. Stay stitching is really great for a neckline also because it is on the bias. You know, this is up and down, and now this is on the bias as it's coming this way before it gets back on the cross grain. And so it's going to be deformed at some point if you're trying to sew it. So we're going to stabilize it with some stay stitching first before we put it together. And when you have a, let's say, a shirt piece, you could actually stay stitch around that whole thing, and you want to do it in the same direction on both sides. So you're not going to start on one end and sew to the other side. You're going to start at the top and go to the middle, and then you're going to start over at the top and go to the middle. You want it to go in the same direction because the pull of the fabric through the machine is adjusting the fibers, and you want it to adjust it in the same direction. If you just go in one way, it's going to kind of shift it and warp it. It's going to warp. You want it to do it in the same direction uniformly, symmetrically, I should say. All right. Here's understitching. So you see here's the facing. And that's going to be folded back under. And this stitch right here, which I have right here, this stitch right here is going to be on the inside of the garment. If you have a really nice shirt, you probably have a facing with understitching, like look at it. And this is what it looks like. You're essentially stitching your seam allowance to your facing. And so that when it folds over, it takes all of that with it, and the top edge is just a nice smooth piece of fabric. That's an excellent way to finish a hem off without a visible stitch, should you want to do that. And then grading seams. We did some of this earlier if you were in my workshop. When it tells you to grade seams, there's actually, I'm going to show you a little bit more about that later, so I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but you're essentially reducing bulk. If you have a lot of things going on in the seam allowance, we want to get some of that material out so it's not just a big chunky cliff of fabric inside your garment. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so for the grain and the cross grain,
Yeah.
if you're working with something that was something else first, and you're trying to figure out which is the grain line and which is the cross grain,
And you don't have selvage?
How big of a deal is it?
So I'm going to say, for cosplay purposes, none.
Okay.
Right? If you don't have a selvage and you don't know which is grain and which is cross grain, you know, unless there's a really, like for a fabric like this, I don't know. I think if you pulled some of it apart and you could tell which is the warp and which is the weft, like if you take some of the threads, if you can pull the threads, I wish I had some woven fabric. I could show you how the threads pull off. Will show you which is the warp and which is the weft.
Because
the warp goes along the direction of the cross grain, I believe. Yeah, so if you can figure out which is the warp and the weft by the way it pulls apart, if it matters to you, you could do it that way. But I think for cosplay purposes, grain and cross grain are pretty much interchangeable for most woven fabrics, like 99% of woven fabrics. So I wouldn't sweat that if it were me. If I just have scrap and I'm like, as long as it's not the bias, you know. All right, moving right along. What is it? It says 30 minutes. We're not going to have a lot of time to do a pattern read through. That's okay though. I might do that later just because I think it'll be funny. I want y'all to see me angry about it. So let's look at the pattern that you have picked up. It's going to have some features on it. It is very information dense. And I think a lot of the frustrations actually come from not reading all of it because it's so overwhelming. You're like, I don't really know what to put my eyes on. So let's go through it one by one. So on the face of the pattern, usually where the pretty picture of a lady wearing the garment is, you're going to have the pattern number, which is going to be on all pieces that you have, and you're going to have your sizes so that you can choose the right packet, because sometimes the packets have the smaller sizes and the other packets have the larger sizes. It is not your ready-to-wear size. Don't go in there thinking you wear a size 5 at Target and you're going to buy the 5. You need to look at the back. And you'll see a chart on the back of the envelope so that you can see it before you buy it. Find your body measurements and see where your body measurements line up with what their size means. They came up with these sizes in the 40s and nothing has really changed. So just find a number. It's an arbitrary number, and it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it matches the pattern that you bought and your body measurements. If you are across different sizes, let's say your hips are size 8 and your top is size 4, that's okay. As long as both those sizes are in the package, go ahead and buy it. There's ways to merge those two things if you need to, which we may not have time to talk to, but there are definitely tutorials out there that I can point you at. It's going to have a list of recommended fabrics. These are recommended fabrics. You don't have to buy them, but they're going to be the ones that the pattern was designed for, so it is ideal to use a fabric that they recommend. This one is just like, make it out whatever you want to, man. Suede, cotton, crepe, like, a little tourist around this pattern. Anybody have any questions? I heard them. Okay. It's also going to have some orthographics on the side. Orthographics are basically line drawings, front and back. The handy thing about the orthographics is that it shows you where all the seams are. Because maybe you're looking in cosplay, like I said, for something with a seam in a specific place to get you a shortcut to that particular shape of pattern. And you need to know where they are. And also the views are labeled. If you want to make A or B or C or some combination, you'll know which pieces to cut out, because all the pattern pieces are going to be labeled with that alpha label. Ooh, man, there's so much on here. Okay, I just wanted you to see the whole thing. But let's look at the pieces. So there's the thing at the top. There's your suggested fabrics. There's your body size measurements for their sizes, so you know where's your measurement, which size am I going to pick. I'm going to pick size small. And you can see where all the materials required lists are below that. It's going to tell you which item you want, if you want to make option B, and your, size. I think the sizes are on the top of this chart. Maybe see, let's see, where is it? Yeah, the sizes are going to be up at the top. You're just going to follow it down, and that's how much fabric you're going to buy. You see down here at the bottom, underneath that chart, how much fabric to buy without nap. That's saying that the pattern layout does not include nap, and that the pattern fabric options does not account for anything that is directional. So if you have a fabric that has a pattern on it that's directional or nap, you need to buy more. And if it doesn't tell you how much to buy because it's like we were lazy and it's without nap, 30%. Just buy 30% more. Because you're gonna not be able to be economical. You're gonna have to lay the pattern pieces in the direction they need to go, regardless of how it all fits together. So you just need more. Then you're gonna have a list of notions here. You need some thread. Weird how much you forget that. A zipper and a hook and eye. Maybe you need some trims. Maybe you need some stabilizer. My pattern that I bought told me to buy some twill tape, so I got some twill tape because we're going to use it to stabilize the neckline. It's also going to say you need some interfacing. Look up there at the top, it says interfacing. You need this many inches, 3/8 of a yard. What kind of interfacing? We don't know. What fabric did you pick? What kind of hand or drape do you want it to have? So you're going to have to figure that out. Inside of the envelope, you have your instruction sheet. The instruction sheet is also very dense. There's a lot here. You're going to have the pieces numbered. You'll see here on this first sheet, that one big piece is 1, the other one is 2. Those are going to be referenced in the instructions, so you definitely want to know which ones they are. Sometimes I get a little sticker and I write what number, like after I've cut the fabric out, and I'm like, this is piece 1, because I'm not sitting here trying to join piece 1 to piece 10 on accident when the instructions are telling me to do it. Also, I label my sleeves now left and right. After the 8th time of putting left on the right side. It's real stupid how often that happens. There's also a glossary. The glossary can sometimes be confusing as well, but it's worth reading to know what they mean when they say to do something. When it says edge finish, it's not going to say it in the instructions. It's going to expect you to come over here and say, oh, neaten one of the raw edges. Neaten raw edges of the seam, hems, and facing using one of these methods. Use a zigzag or overlock, or stitch out from the edge and turn it under and stitch. What does that mean? Okay, what it means actually is, let's say you have a seam allowance. This is your seam allowance right here. You're going to stitch here out into it, and then you're going to kind of use that stitch line as a fold, and then you're going to turn it and stitch again. And that's what that means. Look up here at the top at the sewing directions. Fabric key, you have right side, wrong side, interfacing lining. So that is going to be important for like the layout. It's not, these don't go together, so that's not it. So, but like, if you are looking at, let me see if I have a picture of my pattern on here. I thought I was going to have a top-down camera, guys. I'm sorry. I'm not prepared for this. Here's my pattern piece. There's my layout. You see how some of them have dots on them on jacket B? Is that clear? That key says I need to lay that pattern face down, or I need to be cutting it out on the wrong side of the fabric. All the others are right side of the fabric. So pay attention to that when if you're going to use the layouts. What's your question?
This sort of answered my question, but
Yeah.
Is there any like standard notation in like the patterning world?
Yeah, there's going to be some standards. There may be some small differences, but some things are going to be basically universal across all commercial patterns, and we're going to get to some of those. Like if you see these notches up here, those little triangles, notches and symbols, they're going to define them here for you just in case they're not standard, but most commercial patterns are going to use this notation. Most of them are going to use this notation. This is a gray line arrow. That's going to be the same across all of them. This is not a standard, but they will be marked in basically labeled in some way. And even if you don't look at this pattern marking for this, generally it's labeled on the pattern piece if it's a bust line or a hip line or something. But these notches are pretty universal. Buttonhole marking is pretty universal. So yeah, I would say so. Okay. Here's the first piece of my pattern that I cut. Upper front. I just laughed when I saw that, put it back in and bought it. So the construction steps are arranged by item. Usually it starts with item A, and you'll see here at the top here, it's actually A, B, and C. This is where most of the frustration is located because they're going for brevity, and I think they just like use a few extra words, guys. What I wanted to do, and I don't think we have time to do this, I really wanted to read through, like do a live reading. I should have asked for 2 hours for this panel, but just like to read some of the stuff and be like, why doesn't this make any sense? And what are they actually trying to say? So I'm just gonna give you some general advice since we don't have time to do that. I have a tip sheet. I'm gonna wait to the end because I have a whole tip sheet. Let's keep talking about what's in your pattern. On the pattern sheets themselves, that's like the thin tissuey papery stuff. Those are very large pieces. You're gonna need a lot of room to work with them, like a floor where a cat is not hanging out, or a big table. All the pieces you need to make all of you use should be there, and they're gonna be all together in no particular order, and you're gonna need to cut them out. We'll talk about that in a second. Each piece is gonna be numbered in reference to this guide here, where it says this is, number 1 is like your front pant piece. So pay attention to what the number is. It's going to tell you how many to cut. It's going to tell you if you need to cut it on the fold. Definitely pay attention to that. Because if you need to cut it on the fold and you don't, then your final pattern piece is going to be 2 halves of something, and it's just not even going to have enough to seam it together because that's going to take up material out of the piece. Anyway, pay attention to the cut on fold. These lines are distinctive for the sizes, and so whichever size you've selected, I recommend highlighting it in some way or circling it so that you remember which one you're going to cut to and use. You're also going to see other markings as we've discussed. There is a cut on fold line, so you're going to choose your pattern size, you're going to cut it off, and you're going to put that on a fold. You're going to see the direction of the grain, if it's important to cut it on a grain. You see that arrow there? If there are 2 arrows, I think that you could lay it this way or that way. If there's only 1 arrow, it needs to be up. It'd be like with nap, like it needs to be in the direction of the nap that you're cutting the cat. The dots are typically going to indicate where seams align. So like if you have a sleeve with seam here, there's going to be a dot on the shoulder that's going to indicate this place on the shoulder needs to touch that seam, right? But it's going to tell you that in the directions. The directions are going to say, line up, dot, you know, this dot with the seam. And those numbers by them indicate the size. So you're going to pick the dot based on the size, because it's going to move if it's a larger piece, right? Over here we have the label. All the pieces are going to be labeled. So if you like set it aside and you forget what it was, you can put it back with its family again. See, this one says cut on the fold, and you're going to cut one. Right, so then you know what to do with that piece. Here's your waistline marking. You're also going to see some buttonholes here, so you're also going to have the markings for trims, center points. So like if you're doing a shirt, you want to know where the center of it is. There's going to be shortened and lengthened lines. Do I have a picture of that? I sure don't. I wish I did, but I can describe it. It's okay. So if you have, it'll actually be labeled on the pattern piece as well. They're going to be 2 horizontal lines, and they're typically going to be somewhere in this area or here, and then in the pants it's going to be in this area. I'm a real shorty. Everything is too long for me, so I'm typically shortening it. If you got a really bizarrely long torso and you need to lengthen it, you're going to do it at that spot. And I would definitely Google some YouTube videos to see that process, but that is the best place to do it, because doing it anywhere else is going to cause like weird shapes to the fabric. I almost always shorten mine, and then you smooth out the lines of the edges using a variform ruler or French curve or a real steady hand. So here's my general advice. Make notes on your pattern. It's your pattern. You bought it. Highlight what size you're using at the different sections and circle it. We saw that on the earlier slide. That person was going shopping and they like circled the things that they needed to make sure they didn't forget anything. On the pattern pieces, locate all the trims that you're going to need and mark those so that you know where to put them. If you need to transfer a mark to the fabric, highlight that, because it's a real pain to cut it out and then to take it off and then be like, dang it, I didn't mark the buttonholes, and I can put it back on. So highlight those first. If you're reading the instructions and you have to look up a word, write down what it means on the instruction. Just writing it down is going to help you remember. But then also you have that reference there. If something doesn't make sense and you asked your friend, hey, what does this mean? And y'all figured it out. Or maybe you just did it wrong and realized when you got done, oh, that's what it means. Write that down so when you do it again, you remember. Because you're going to do it again next week. You know, you don't have time today. You're going to do it next week, so write it down so future you knows what you meant. Highlight important steps, and then let's say you're only making view A and you're not making view B, and if the instructions are stupid enough to do something like, for view A, do this, for view B, do this, mark view B out. Or cover it up in some way so you don't accidentally, you're just going along and you accidentally do that step. Or if you're doing something for cosplay and you know you're not going to put buttons there, mark that out. Don't make buttons if you don't want buttons. And then what I usually do is I just make the garment as is, exactly how it says, without any modifications at all, just to see what it looks like. And then that way you can kind of see, okay, this is what the pattern piece is supposed to be, but it's baggy here, so I know I need to take it in this spot. I don't like this seam here, I'm going to move it. You know, it's way too long and too short in the back. Here are the places where I'm actually going to adjust it. I'm not going to use this piece at all, so we're going to skip that step. This is how you're going to find out if you can skip steps, is like basically what are you going to use it for the end. If there's going to be a zipper here and you're going to delete the zipper, there's a whole section you can skip. If it's talking about aligning, you'll see what you need to change to just like not do aligning, to just hem instead of doing that. Here's some more advice about cutting the pattern out. Iron your paper. If you've already been to my panels, you know that I'm gonna tell you how important ironing is. Low, no heat, or no steam, low heat. Iron that paper flat so that it lays flat on your fabric. And then the first time you cut it out, so like you have this big sheet, I'm gonna pull it out and show you. I'll make a big mess. What I'm gonna do when I get this pattern is I'm gonna take this piece and I'm gonna cut around all of it. I mean, like, it's pretty tight here, so I'm gonna get as close as I can, but I'm just gonna cut on the outside of it, and then I'm gonna lay it down, and I'm gonna, like, if I know I'm gonna make some changes, like I'm gonna be doing size, like 8 over here and 6 over here, that's gonna give me the space to make that new line before I cut it. Or if I, like, I'm not sure yet, I will use pattern paper. You can get pattern marking paper, right? And do you guys know what pattern marking paper is? It's a paper that you can get, you can lay under the pattern, between the pattern paper and your fabric, and you use a tracing wheel, and it basically makes a chalk line along that line. That way you don't have to cut it apart if you're thinking you're gonna make adjustments later. So use tracing paper, that's what pattern tracing paper, and a tracing wheel. And then that way later on, if you need to make adjustments. And then also what I do, there's like a lot of extra tissue, keep it, don't throw it away, don't crumple it up. Lay it to the side. If you need to make another adjustment later and add more material, you can just tape it on, and then you have more stuff, right? And then before you start cutting, don't just have read the directions. Like, definitely read the directions all the way through twice, and make sure you understand that you've made all your notes that you want to make. Read the pattern pieces themselves before you cut. I mean, even if you get it on the paper, before you get those scissors on there, before you touch that rotary cutter, look at all the pieces and make sure you know what all those little symbols mean, because you want to make sure you're going to be transferring what you want to transfer, that you haven't placed something in the wrong place. Oh, this was supposed to be with NAF. This was supposed to be wrong side up. Get all those notes first before you cut, and highlight them, make a little diary of what you're supposed to do with it. And I think that's pretty much it, and we are almost out of time. So we definitely can't read through the directions in 10 minutes, but we can look at them real quick. So here's the pattern I got, and we're just going to identify all the things I talked about. Here's the glossary. Here's the shorten and lengthen directions. When it's going to tell you how to do it. To shorten, crease along the adjustment line, make a fold half the amount needed, tape in place. Like, I just feel like that's needlessly complicated. Was that clear to everybody? Does everybody know what that means? Like, do I need to explain that? Because I feel like that actually was pretty clear. Let's find something more confusing. When alteration lines are not on the tissue, shorten or lengthen at the lower edge. Oh, thanks for that tip, buddy. Is that how you do that?
I don't know what that means still.
Okay, so yeah. Okay, great. So we have this upper back piece. Maybe I want it to be a little longer, but there's no length adjustment line. You're just going to make this, you're just going to add inches to the bottom of the piece. So that's what it means. So you're just going to make it at the bottom. Let's see if there's actually any pieces that have shorten and lengthen lines on here. Because I am going to shorten it. My torso is very short. I actually don't see any, so yeah, I'm just going to have to make it up. A full fold line. Fold line, what is a fold line? I didn't define that. Tell me. What's a fold line mean? So for this piece is ultimately going to be folded, is what it means, and this is the point that it's going to fold. So if it matters for the pattern fabric that you're using, you want to make sure that lays where it lays, but this is just like where a piece is going to ultimately be folded. So you want to mark that so that you fold it in the right spot and it ends up where it needs to be on the other side. All right? Let's see here. What else can we do? Shrink fabric if not labeled pre-shrink. It didn't say pre-wash. It just said pre-shrink. I don't ever pre-wash because my cosplays are never seeing a washing machine. But I'm definitely pressing. Here it's telling you to circle the layout. Let me see here. For single thickness, place fabric right side up. For fur pile fabrics, place the pile down. Well, that's useful. Pile side down. We know what pile is now, right? So we're going to take the part that's sticking out and we're going to put it on the table. And the weave is going to be up. Look at this little star. Cut this piece first, allowing enough fabric to cut other pieces first, sorry. Cut all the other pieces first and allow enough for this piece to be cut extra. So if you look at the layout, number 16 down there at the bottom, it's basically saying you're gonna cut everything else first, you're gonna leave a little spot down there at the bottom, then you're gonna unfold the fabric and cut out number 16 last. That's what that means. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yep, see it's telling you to transfer markings. That's good, that's good. Broken line boxes, ABC, in layouts represent pieces cut by measurements provided. Broken line boxes, ABC. Do you see those? What on earth does that mean? See, and this is why I was like, this is going to be a funny panel, because I consider myself to be exceedingly literate. I have an English degree and a French degree and a doctorate. And I'm like, my guy, what does this mean? Where's the camp school instruction sheet? Broken line boxes in layouts represent.
Is that where the different size lines?
Does ABC mean different pattern?
That's what I'm thinking, but they're lowercase, but there's an exclamation point. And I don't see it. So here's the thing though, these are general instructions. They may not apply. Because I don't see any broken line boxes. And that's part of the problem. Someone copy pasted from some other like glossary on a pattern. And I don't think it applies here. Because I don't see any broken line boxes. So I think we can safely skip that. And so that's another tip. Sometimes it doesn't apply. Like ask a friend, phone in someone else and be like, you're not seeing a broken line box, are you? Get a room full of people and ask them if they see it. And they don't. I'm going to keep going. So here's your directions. Actually, I really like the orthographics they have here. Here's the glossary on this pattern. So when it says make a narrow hem, this is what it actually means. Ease stitch. Stitch along the seam line using a long machine stitch. Pull threads when adjusting to fit. I don't feel like that's super clear. But I already talked to you about ease stitching, so you know what that means now, so you don't have to worry about that. Stay stitch. Stitch 1/8 of an inch from the seam line in the seam allowance. Yeah, that's okay. I would say use a shorter stitch, but that's still the idea. Okay. We got a few minutes. We can look at some of these things. Here's my fabric key. Here it's telling you how to grade it. You see that's clipping corners. When it tells you to clip the corners, that's what it means. I don't know why I'm making y'all look at it like this. But yeah, so we're going to reduce bulk. It's going to tell you to trim the corners. This is what it means. It's going to tell you to notch the outer curve. This is what it means. And I don't recommend skipping these steps. You should definitely do it. All right. Sewing direction.
Does that make that easier?
What's that?
Are there any tools that make that easier, just like X-Acto knife?
Like small snips. I think there are notching things that you can get where like it'll make the little V-clip, but like you have to sharpen them a lot. Like they will get dull, and I don't think they work for every fabric. I don't know that. I think you just got to get in some like little good sharp titanium handled snips with a spring, the spring-loaded handles, so you're not like just wearing your grip out and just. I think a spring-loaded grip is probably going to be a spring-loaded grip snip is going to be the easiest thing to do.
Scissors for anything but sewing, ideally. When people have fabric scissors, like keep them.
Oh yeah. Buy some fabric scissors. Keep them sharp. Don't let anybody cut paper with them. Don't let anybody cut anything with sticky things on them. I have some like titanium Teflon coated scissors that I use for everything else, and then like 8 specialty scissors for fabric. Okay, let's see here. We're gonna stay stitch the upper front. Oh, it wants you to stay stitch the upper front. Okay, but like just where the line is or the whole thing? I'm gonna do the whole thing to be safe, but it's probably just where the line is, and I'm saying that because I know as a person who sews a lot, that's a princess seam. And we like to stay stitch our princess seams. So I'm gonna say in this reference, it just means where it's showing you, not the whole thing. Pin the upper side front to the upper front, clip the upper front where necessary, and stitch. Yeah, so you have pattern piece 2, and it says pin upper side front to the upper front, clipping front where necessary. All right. We're going to take piece number 2 and pin it to piece number 1, matching those little notches. When y'all cut out your pattern paper, this is also a pro tip, which I didn't mention. You don't have to cut those little notches out. You don't even have to cut them into the fabric. You can just snip where they are, as long as you know where they are, and you're matching them up piece to piece. You don't have to make a little triangle. You could even like draw a line as long as you can see it. Like if you have like a set of gossamer fabric, you just draw a line. You don't have to snip a whole triangle, and you don't have to make it come out of the fabric. That's just extra God-bothering. Anyway, so you're gonna match those 2 things up, and then you're gonna stitch. I'm gonna say what is unclear about this. Clipping where necessary. Like, what does that mean? Like, well, how do you know what's necessary? Yeah, do you know?
One thing that confuses me is that, like, you know, it says pin 2, but there's no reference to what that previous piece was.
Yeah, it says 2 upper front. It should have labeled upper front 1.
And
it means.
If I didn't know that.
Yeah. So in the
white
previous.
And dark were met like top and bottom.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Flip it over.
So then we're gonna look at the key here. Here's your fabric key. If something is shaded, that's the right side of the fabric. That's the fabric you want coming out. If it is not shaded, if it's white, that's the wrong side of the fabric. So you can see in this view, we're looking at the right side of the fabric, and then this is the wrong side of the fabric. So they want you to put them right sides together. Yeah, they didn't say that in the step. They didn't say pin right sides together and stitch. They just illustrated it. So now we know we need to pay attention to the picture, right? And so here, when you flip it over, this is the right side, and we're going to top stitch that seam. So yeah, good call out. That's how you know, right? Press seam towards upper front. So they're skipping the number again. The upper front is this piece number 1. That's why they really emphasized it with that extra P. Remember what the upper front is. These patterns are so stupid. I wish we could get through more of this, but mainly this panel was to help give you kind of like a heads up about where to find all the information was, and to just validate your feelings that it is frustrating. It really, really is. And the only way to really relieve it is to read it and read it again, and then kind of like, if you didn't quite understand it, put a question mark, move on, and see if maybe some of the later steps elucidate what it means or where it's going, or reread the step before it that you did understand and see if it informs the next step a little bit more with the mindset of like, I'm trying to figure this out. All right, we know what top stitch means since we looked at the glossary, right? So we're going to top stitch the seam, then we're going to stitch the upper front sections to the upper back at the shoulders. So it's still not labeling upper front, but we know that upper front is this one because it was in uppercase letters here. So I guess it's going to stop numbering them after it's like, this is its official name in uppercase. We're going to stop calling it that from now on. So stitch at the shoulders and sides. So here and here are going to get stitches. We're going to match those notches. I guess this notch here is going to go that. It is white, which means we're going to do it right, like the wrong side is out, the right sides are together. It doesn't show you the back. Let's assume. All right. Pin the lower front to the lower middle, matching notches. Stitch. Press seam towards lower front. That's pretty clear. Where does it get confusing here?
Is press seam, is that you iron it then?
So you use your iron to press it.
Okay.
So iron is when you have wrinkles in a garment and you want to iron them out, you're going to make this motion here. Pressing is literally push down, come up, push down, come up. You want to press a seam. You're gonna do it a specific way to get it to look nice, but it's gonna depend on what fabric you have. But typically, you're gonna press it flat, and then you're gonna press it to one side, then the other, and then if you're gonna press it open, you press it open, but if you're gonna press it to one side, then you just take it to the one side and like really smush it down. I got a whole slide on pressing in my other presentation. I'm gonna post those at some point, so if you wanna follow me online, I'll be posting those soon. But yeah, pressing is basically making lay flat. And I highly recommend when it says to press it, and also in other places where it doesn't say to press and you just get the urge, you should press it. Because if you don't press it, it's not going to be laying correctly, and the next step is going to be harder if you're not managing it in its sort of like semi-final state, right? You also don't know how good your stitch turned out. So maybe you press it and it's like real wibbly and bulky and you're like, you can't get it to press out. You know you need to undo it at that point and redo it rather than trying to, get your whole garment done and then press it and then realize, I gotta fix it over here, but I've already finished it, I'm not gonna do it, put it in the trash. Well, I think we're out of time. I think people are probably gonna come into the next panel. So that wasn't as thorough as I was hoping it would be. I think this whole con just overestimated my ability to get through material this whole time, but I'm always available for talking to you. Hey, is that?
The one with the pressing, that's how you put like these elements on, right? Because if you iron, then it can
Yes.
stretch.
Yeah. When you're putting interfacing on and it's fusible, you do press it on. You